Kay Byfield, and this is your ArtSpeaks Studio moment from ArtSpeaks Studio in Dallas, Texas. And today I'm going to talk about shape shifters, people who use shape in unusual ways in their paintings. The two key elements for paintings are shape and value. Value is the light and dark in any scene, and we cannot see an image without value. So value is essential. Shape is the way that the values are put together, and anytime there's a change in color or value, there will be the suggestion or the creation of a shape. And so shape also becomes a very key element. The other elements, line size, color, texture, space, all of those are discretionary. They're not essential for any one painting, but you have to have changes in value and shape. Even when the colors are very close in value and the edges of the shapes are soft as they are in this painting, there is still shape. And so that kind of change in color or value or texture or any of the other elements will create a shape. So shape is always essential. So let's talk about the ways good artists use shape. This is an example of a painting where the shapes are boring. It was done by an inexperienced painter who happened to be me many years ago. And the composition isn't bad, the color isn't terrible, but all of the shapes are clearly delineated. The boat is a boat, the clothes hanging on the clothesline are clear, the ropes are ropes. Everything is separated from everything else. There's no way for the eye to travel around the painting. This is uninspired shape making. But good painters know how to find ways to allow the eye to travel across shapes and for the viewer to be able to assume some things, to have some things kind of go off into mystery, so that not everything is predictable and the painting is more interesting and engaging. They have two ways of doing this. One is to merge some shapes together, find ways to join shapes from different things so that the eye can move. And the other is to break up the shapes in interesting and unpredictable ways. Andy Evanson is an award-winning painter and sought-after teacher who stresses the desirability of painting with an economy of brush strokes. In his videos and in his workshops, he tells painters to consciously connect shapes in the midtones, that means the middle values, and make sure that the lights and darks are special. In this painting, there's a light sky and some lights in some of the building surfaces on the left and between the trees and on the ground on the right. The middle values span the values from the left across the foreground and into the trees on the right. And the darks include some of the trees and the figure on the left foreground and the poles, the telephone poles on the right. Joining all the shapes in the midtones as he has makes it easy for the eye to move around the painting. It also allows the viewer to create meaning for themselves because they cannot definitively read the shapes on every object. Frank Webb is known for creating simplified geometric shapes and arbitrary colors and values that are interesting and quickly identifiable. He also is known for using values in an interesting way so that the same roof line can be light against a darker sky in one place and lighter against a darker against a lighter sky in another. And he makes it all work. He calls that that contrast in value or color, he calls that push-pull. I call it simultaneous contrast, but it works and it ties a painting together. Like Andy Evanson, Ann Abott likes to tie the different shapes across the surface so that the eye moves around the painting. In this painting, she does it with the dark, very dark shadow that runs across the foreground, through the figure, through the table, and up in behind that figure's head, so that a very simplified subject becomes very interesting and the eye can readily travel around the surface. I also would like you to notice that she doesn't have any soft edges. Everything is hard-edged, but the painting works beautifully. And Charles Reade was a master of dissolving subjects so that the eye could travel in and out of a figure or flowers or any kind of a still life without a clear delineation between one object and the next. His painting style is absolutely unique and clearly identifiable. As you can see, joining shapes can be done in a number of ways and is very powerful and useful for a good artist. It makes for a much more interesting painting. The viewer participates in the understanding of the painting because so much is left unsaid, and the viewer has to supply the information out of their own imagination. It's a really positive way to go at this. But there's another way that artists can shift shapes, and that is by breaking up the shapes in unexpected ways. John Salmonen's paintings tend to be quite large, and some areas are full of intricate shapes that break up the larger shapes. Here's a close-up of the section of the buildings and vehicles, and I want you to notice that the shapes are broken up in a way that adds interests and makes the painting seem to shimmer. The values and colors within the larger shapes are kept close, but differentiate from one another when you're near to the painting. Salmonen uses these arbitrary shapes in a lot of the painting, but refrains from doing it everywhere. So there are large areas like the roadway that do not break up in those shapes. That provides some relief to the eye, makes the eye be able to move around the painting surface in a more interesting way, and makes the painting less predictable. Now in her 80s, Judy Betts has a very identifiable, unique style that is based on creating interesting shapes that don't necessarily reflect exactly what the subject matter offered. She does this by using a liquid mask, a maskoid, where she covers her whites and her pure lights, and then after that is dry, she paints an underpainting that's a mid-tone that varies in terms of color and temperature across the surface in an unpredictable way. When that's dry, she paints in some darker values, not appreciably dark. Her paintings don't get that dark. They stay in a mid-value range, so they're pretty high key. And then she lifts off the mask and she paints back into some of those shapes with pure color. The paintings are really interesting. The subject matter is identifiable, but it's abstracted in an interesting way. And her paintings really work. So I call her a shapeshifter. All of these painters who combine shapes or break them up in ways that are unexpected are shapeshifters. They're people who shift the shapes in a way that makes the painting more interesting, more unique, less expected, and of course, less predictable. And that ability to use shape to advantage and not be tied to what the actual shapes that the eye perceives in a face or a boat or a cat make everything more special. I hope that this is interesting to you, that this will inspire your thinking about ways that you can either break up or join shapes in an interesting fashion, and that you will continue to enjoy happy painting.